Oh, yeah.
but no artist would claim that they are uh, creating in a vacuum. And what, Michael Chabon just put it very succinctly, all novels are sequels,
Right.
whether we read that book or not.
Welcome to our latest episode of Book Reporter Talks. To our guest today is Hanff Korelitz, and we're going to be talking about her latest thriller novel, The Sequel. I'm talking to Jean before the book's release, thus we don't have our book reporter review yet, but I'm going to share some other praise for this book. Just so you know, this is a hot book this fall. Kirkus has a starred review, and Kirkus doesn't star much, and they don't love much, calling it wicked entertainment. Publishers Weekly, in another starred review, said it's another taut and compulsively readable spellbinder from Korelitz. And in a starred review, Bookpage called it a hilarious, snippy, and deliciously mean satire of the publishing world, in addition to a nail-biting suspense novel. And oh boy, does that nail it. It's going to be one of my Book Reporter bets on selections. I've been talking about this book for a while now, read it on vacation, and it's just terrific. And with that, welcome, Jean. So glad to have you here.
Thanks, Carol. It's great to be here.
So here we go. I was thinking about the journey for this book. The plot was a book you were working on during the pandemic, put it aside. You went and wrote The Latecomer. And then when the plot comes along, you've got Anna, who is like, okay, what is she doing? What is she? She's the wife. She's the wife. She's the literary wife. And then did you always plan to write a sequel to the plot?
Mm. Well, first of all, that was almost
Almost
accurate.
right. Okay.
What happened was that I was writing The Latecomer,
Oh,
put The Latecomer aside, wrote the plot. I was having a lot of trouble with The Latecomer. I kept um, rearranging the furniture without really solving the problem because I didn't really understand what the problem was.
uh-huh.
I wrote the plot very quickly during the pandemic in a kind of burst of fear and loathing, basically. I was not a happy camper. I was very, very angry and very, very scared, and literally wrote it under the covers.
Hmm.
Um, and something about writing this book in 4 months enabled me to kind of break the logjam of the latecomer. So then I went back to the latecomer, saw right away what the problem was, what I had to do, spent another, I don't know, 9 months on that. So the plot came out, the latecomer came out. Everybody who read the plot and then saw the latecomer wondered, what is she doing writing this literary novel and, so quickly after the plot? I mean, they can certainly be forgiven for thinking that was the order of what happened. But really, those two books are so different from each other, and yet
Yes.
they are so enmeshed in the way
Yes.
they were created. So in my mind, they're just like they're they're just so tied up together. I did not anticipate a sequel to the plot. I've never written a sequel, although it is true that I did revisit a character from my second novel in my fifth novel, but nobody read either novel, so we don't really think of it as a kind of a series. It just happened to be the same character, and I think of all the people. And again, the not many people who read that second book, I got one email from a reader saying, "Isn't this the same character that you had in this earlier book?" So points to that reader, but it's not really part of my
Hmm.
modus operandi to think, A is for alibi, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Um, it just popped into my head a few years later, an idea about what might happen next to this character. She's so strange and awful and wicked and surprising. She surprised me all the time. And it just occurred to me that it would be interesting to find out what happened next. And I think I was packing for a move. We moved downtown in Manhattan. I'm coming to you from almost as far south in Manhattan as you can get. And I was packing up my books, and I just had this idea that that the widow of this, the protagonist in the first novel in the plot, who was a writer, should write a book of her own.
Mhm.
She should get the opportunity to see that it's not that easy. And wouldn't it be interesting if she were in the exact same position that her husband had been in and had a taste of what he experienced in terms of the harassment that he experienced and the accusations of, let's call it plagiarism, not exactly plagiarism, but yeah. So it just kind of popped into my head as I was handling these dusty books. Maybe I was inhaling too much dust and from books, and it just kind of came to me.
Yeah, it's like, oh, wow, this could be a really great idea. You know, one of your epigraphs is from Michael Chabon, and it says, all novels are sequels. And I really love that. So talk about that line. It's like, all novels are
Oh,
sequels.
when I saw it, I just started laughing because, he's absolutely true. We are, we're all stepping into the river, and the river started a long time ago. I mean, the novel alone is 250 years old. Some people might push it back even farther, but basically it's a modern art form. It's a relatively recent art form, and that means there are only 300 years of novels. There is nothing that is being written today that is not somehow in conversation with something that was written and published during those 300 years.
Right.
The marriage plot, the husband who goes missing after a crime. I've written about that. I've written 2 novels that are based on other novels. I just read Demon Copperhead, which is, based on David Copperfield. I mean, this is not a bad thing. This is a thing that all writers, I would say all artists, understand, that we consume art, we read novels, we see movies, we go to the theater, whatever. And when we sit down to write a story, that story has been written before. It's what we do with the story, our version of the story, that makes it our work.
Oh, yeah.
But no artist would claim that they are creating in a vacuum. And what, Michael Chabon just put it very succinctly, all novels are sequels,
Right.
whether we read that book or not. So I just loved it. I thought it was just the perfect quote for the book.
Perfect line. I went back and I looked and I go, that is so dead on. So dead on. I also love the promo line that publisher sending out. She's living the contented life of a literary widow, enjoying her husband's royalty checks in perpetuity. And the idea of her as a literary widow is so amusing. So tell us what her life as a widow is like, because it's, collecting the money, living in the New York apartment.
Right.
Who's
Well,
she?
I mean, for those who haven't read the plot, I will only say that the idea of her as a literary widow is rich. Okay. It's rich. That's all I'll say. But, technically that is what she is. And, the first line of the sequel is, first of all, it wasn't even that hard. So, she doesn't intend to write a book, but she says it in an interview. Somebody says, what are you going to do next? And she says, I'm thinking of writing a book, and everybody approves of this. She gets all this approbation. And so she keeps saying it. And then it occurs to her, why not? Why shouldn't I write a book? And like many a first novel, she draws from her own life, or at least the version of her own life that she has made public. It's not necessarily true, but she writes about falling in love with a writer and his suicide, and how she survives his suicide only to make art herself. I mean, it's hilarious.
It is.
Maybe I'm easily amused, but it's hilarious. And, she loves to look at writers and their pretensions and their narcissisms and their squabbles and their pettiness. And she just finds it all very amusing. But once she becomes an author herself and gets to experience, the joys and sorrows of being an author, especially what it's like to be out there and be the recipient of people's opinions of her work. It's kind of a whole new ball game, having to go out into the world and experience the pain of people who have actually are bereaved
Mhm.
because they've loved people who have died and who have died of self-harm, you know, and she has to sort of pretend to be sympathetic towards them. I mean, it's rich. Okay, it's just very rich.
That's definitely rich, definitely rich. And I love that her novel is called The Afterword. And I
Yes,
love
and
that.
my publisher made this as a little PR thing. This is the cover of the Afterword. Of course, it doesn't exist. It's just for fun, but that's the side of it. And in the back, it's got lots of fun things from the novel. It has the description of Anna Williams Bonner, our fictional author, but it also has things like Taylor Swift's response to it, which is relentless and ravishing, and also Sarah Jessica Parker's response, which is the best novel I've read since A Little Life. And the whole, and it's a read with Jenna selection, as if,
Yeah.
and a whole, New York Times excerpt from the New York Times review. So I just thought it was so funny when the publisher decided that they would mock this up.
So
It was,
great. It's so great.
yeah, a lot
It's
of fun.
just, and I love that with that title and throughout the dialogue and the settings, there's so much wry humor in this book. And am I right that you had fun writing this book as well?
I do know people who love to write.
Right.
Meg Wolitzer loves to write. Can't wait to get to the desk every day. I am not that person. I fall in with the vast majority of writers who love having written, which is, I believe, a quote that originated with Dorothy Parker, because of course it did. Anytime we hear anything clever, it comes from Dorothy Parker. But there were great moments of levity. I mean, it's still very hard work, but there were moments of great levity. And to be honest, yes, I sort of make fun of a lot of people. I'm an equal opportunity maker fun of, but I can't understand why more writers and aspiring writers aren't really, really mad at me, because certainly Anna, really has fun at their expense. And
Hmm.
I think I would be much more annoyed than most of the people I've encountered are at me.
Well, I just think you're satirizing the world of publishing, which is just it's its own world. I mean, if you sit
Sure.
there and talk to most people and you ask them like, "What are you reading?" and you're like surprised it's a book that came out 3 years ago, or they're reading something current, but they have no idea what the process is behind
Mhm.
the machination that happens behind. And I love the part where Anna was reading the kind of author profile she wants.
Oh,
Okay,
yes, that's right.
in these various publications, trying to figure out how she wanted hers to read. And I confess, I have read author profiles for years, and I haven't really thought about them the way that she writes about them. And as she's trying to figure out who she says at 40, give or take, she
Mhm.
didn't fall into the new young author category, but she didn't fall into the anonymous mid-list author category either. And there's a lot there. And I feel like just writing about how would I want to be presented is something that, yeah, publicists think about where they're going to put you, but who are you? You're the same person wherever you are. Did you have fun like
Mhm.
writing that whole section there? Because it's great. It's like drop
Oh,
dead
thank
great.
you. I can see why you would especially gravitate toward that section. But if Anna were here, she's not, she doesn't exist. But if Anna were here, she would say, "But Carol, why wouldn't everybody prepare for such an important interview by reading every New York Times author profile and figuring out how they are made and how I can, maximize my position for success. Who should I be in this profile?" And, in her case, it's the grieving widow. I mean, it's not a tough call for her. And she's very lachrymose in her interview with the New York Times. She's the stunned and grieving widow who never thought she could write a book, but one day she just felt compelled to do it.
It's so great. There's a profile that you built that was built around an activity, like the author would be cooking or the author be walking their dog. Okay, if there was a profile of you, what is it? If you were going to be
Oh, that's a
profiled,
great question. You know what's so sad? I did get or there was an outreach from the New York Times about 2 years ago when I didn't have a book,
Mm.
inquiring about a profile. And of course we were all terribly excited. And then I think the writer was told, well, she'll have a book in about a year and a half. Great, we'll wait for it then. But of course, in the newspaper world, those people don't sit still. So they were reassigned somewhere, and now no profile. That's very sad, but that's life. What would my profile be like? The short answer is I'm not Anna, so I'll do whatever they want. It would be beyond thrilling to have that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, be
It was
lovely.
just really funny
You have
because
to
I'm thinking,
understand a lot of this is like, I sent Anna to every single, you know, book series and literary festival that I myself have never been invited to. So it's like, well, at least I'll have the vicarious experience of having my fictional character go to them. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of kind of wish fulfillment. Also, bear in mind, I have never been on a proper book tour.
oh,
I
really?
was not nearly well read. I mean, my books were not widely enough read to justify a book tour in the pre-pandemic times. Nothing happened during the pandemic, and now I feel like these old-fashioned book tours just don't really happen anymore. So I kind of missed the mark on that. But Anna goes on a book tour. She's all over the place. She's hitting every big town and city in America.
And she never loses her luggage and everything goes through on time and they're good crowds. There you go. Anna's got the dream. She's got the dream.
Well, she has a very compelling book on a very compelling topic.
A very compelling topic. There's also talk about literary fiction as opposed to genre fiction. And I once had someone who had written something very literary ask me if I thought he would be eligible for prizes. And I said, "How many did you sell?" And he said, 1,500. I said, "You're eligible." And he laughing. And I said, because genre fiction, while it's going to be disparaged a lot of times, that's mostly where the sales are. That's mostly Anna's kind of work is where a lot of the sales are actually happening. So do you hear a lot of talk about that? It's like, oh, is it going to sell or is it commercial? And I never really thought about any of this till I started
You
this
didn't?
company
That
because
that I find shocking. I would have thought that you
before
even
I
as
started
a
the
journalist.
company, it was just a book. Now it's going to get this kind of treatment. It's going to get
Mhm.
that kind of treatment depending
Mhm.
upon what kind of book it is. And I didn't really think about it before.
Yeah. And yet, when there's somebody who can really thread that needle between the genres, we love that person. I mean, I just had a conversation this morning with someone about Kate Atkinson, who
Mhm.
I was lucky enough to see at the Edinburgh Book Festival last month. And I mean, I was thrilled to be able to like see her in person. I
Right.
think she's a great, great, great novelist. I mean, she's gotten a lot of respect for her literary fiction, but her Jackson Brodie novels about
Mhm.
the um, investigator Jackson Brodie are just as beautifully written, and
Mhm.
plots are amazing. So, I mean, who would even bother to say, "Oh, Kate Atkinson, you're a literary novelist, or you're a genre novelist"? She's Kate Atkinson. She
Right.
can write whatever she wants,
Yeah.
and but to be somebody like that, I mean, that is a really, really tough needle to thread.
Mhm.
In my own case, I always thought of myself as a literary novelist, but my first two literary novels, were not published. And the first novel that I did manage to publish was a genre book. It was a thriller.
Mhm.
And then I actively rejected the avenue that was offered to me, which was to write a sequel and then another sequel and then another sequel.
Mhm.
I wanted to be a literary novelist, and therefore I spent the next 20 years kind of bouncing around between genres, which is a whole big part of the reason nobody nobody had found me,
Yeah.
or they'd find me because they liked a genre book, but the next book was too literary, and then they
Mhm.
would say, I don't like her anymore, or vice versa. They would read a literary book, and then the next one had a murder in it, and they would say, well, I didn't sign up for that. Finally, I got to the point where I had found the people in publishing who were going to support me no matter what. And those people were my agent, Suzanne, and my editor, Deb, who are lampooned slightly in this book.
Yes.
And
Yes.
with great love, of course. And those two women basically, communicated to me that I would be supported whatever genre
Mhm.
my next book fell into. And it has been such a gift and such a surprise. And I often question whether I deserve it, but I could not have managed it if it weren't for those two people.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, and we'll talk about them in a little bit because it's exactly the agent and editor conversation. Because the take of publishing, at one point they're out and they're talking about the MFA program and people belonging to MFA program. And their agent or editor have a lot to say about it. And there's this great talk they have, of course, over dinner at Balthazar. I mean, it's like, this is exactly where we're going to be. And my favorite line was, rent a cheap place somewhere, buy a paperback of Stephen King's On Writing, and just do it. Like, just write. Did you go to an MFA program? Were you in one or?
I didn't, but and I've taken a little heat about this from MFA people, especially after the plot, which kind of satirizes the MFA program. I
Mhm.
have friends who loved their MFA programs, who felt that they became better writers, deeply valued the experience. I didn't do it, but I spent 2 years at graduate school in England,
Mhm.
sitting around reading books and smoking
Mhm.
clove cigarettes and, basically not earning a penny. And those 2 years were incredibly valuable in terms of uh, the work that I eventually did. I wasn't doing good work at the time, but having those 2 years of, I'm going to call it self-indulgent,
Mhm.
self-development, um, were crucial. So I'm not pure. I wasn't down the mines. I wasn't, I didn't have a paper route at 5:30 in the morning. I wasn't renting a cheap place and reading Stephen King's On Writing. Uh, we all get there if we're going to get there. And
Yeah.
I am not going to be critical if somebody's path leads them through Iowa City
Mhm.
or Columbia or anywhere else. If
Anywhere
that's what
else?
you need to
Anywhere
do,
else?
you do it.
But I know your agent and editor. Did they have fun with your view of publishing as you? They must have. I could just picture Suzanne laughing. I could just picture her and Deb just going, "Oh my gosh, it's so true."
They were very good about it. And they did something that really surprised me. They offered themselves to Celadon's marketing team as a kind of prize for
Yes. Yes.
anybody who pre-orders the book
Yes.
and sends in the receipt gets entered for, a meeting with Deb and Suzanne. And you can pitch them a book, you can ask them about the publishing world, you can do whatever you want. But I just thought that was so funny that they offered to do that. Yeah, so they're just so great. I'm sure they've appeared in their authors' books before. But I think I did kind of capture the way they talk to each other.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like the shorthand. It's the shorthand. I love the part where where these people are doing this reading, and there are people that want to be published, and they just leave because
They
it's
leave. It's like,
insufferable. It's like
I'm out.
I could just picture walking out the door and doing that bye thing. I've seen people do it, the bye thing in the back, like where we're going, and they're like
Yeah.
hand signals that happen. It's like for later, like you
See
know
you
where to
at the
meet us.
place when this is over.
We're going to
Yeah.
the place, but I could just picture the hand signals, especially from Suzanne, like, and then like, walking out very like, I got to take a call or something. Very, very funny.
Yeah, at 8 at night. Sure.
Yeah, I got to go
Right.
do something. I got to do
Yeah, something
something.
important is happening. Yeah.
But it is really interesting. And I like that thing as a prize because, I have this feeling right now that we always want people to pre-order. Okay. But when you pre-order, are you also going to get to go to an event? Because a lot of times there's a book sale tied to an event. And I sit there and I'm like, but what if you pre-order the audio? What if you pre-order the ebook? You can
Mhm.
pre-order whatever you want to arrive, whatever you want. But to go to a live event, it usually is you're buying a print book. Yet
Mhm.
audio as a format, we'll talk about audio in a bit, is like here. And a lot of people are only reading E. We hear from readers all the time because they don't want to be having books around their house or whatever. Yet events are still tied. And I've had conversations with booksellers about this, about it's tied to the print book. You go to a big book festival, and I really saw this when I was in Charleston 2 years ago. And we both went. It was Tina Brown and Betsy Prelo were speaking.
I was there.
Yes, you were there.
I
You were
was
sitting
sitting right next to you,
excellent
actually.
point. Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we went to the back, and my friend got her book signed by Tina, and I got mine signed by Betsy, or vice versa. And she handed me her book, and she says, "I'm just going to listen to it on E or audio." And that night, I was out with a woman from Buxton Books, and I said, "Just think about this. A lot of these people are never going to get this book unless there's a QR code to get the audio through you or something." And you think about, so I got out of there and I called somebody who will remain nameless, who runs a big book festival. And he said to me on the phone, "I have honestly never thought about that." And I've been at book events over the summer, and I've said this to people. I said, "You're selling one format where the other two formats are viable. I mean, nobody's going to call you with your sales and just say, 'Here's your print number.' It's never going to happen anymore. It's a combo of the three. And audio has crept up that sometimes it's almost as big as print. But yet, a
Yeah.
lot of the things we're doing, and I said, we've got to make a change on this simply because there are people that may come, but it's not the format that, and I just knew because my friend handed me the book. It was a $35 book. She goes, "Here, you take it. I'm not going to read this." And she said, "I just had them just sign their name in it because like I was going to hand it to you." And I was like, I never, so it's a thing to think about going forward. I'm always thinking about what we should do in the industry, like,
This is just what we were saying before we started, that, you can't help yourself. You're constantly innovating.
no, it's this marketer. I mean, I'm just walking and I'm going like, well, why did this work? Why doesn't this work? So where do you write? Do you write in an office? Do you write? What's changed through the years? Like, what have you done writing?
I've never been wedded to a place there until about 20 years ago. I had this idea that I had to have the perfect place to write, and I wouldn't be able to write if everything wasn't perfect. And then I noticed I wasn't writing in that place. So I mean, I can write on my couch, in my bed, at the bookstore cafe, on the train. To me, it's more a temporal thing. Like if I'm in it, I'm in it. And if like
Mhm.
I'm not writing at the moment, that means I'm not writing anywhere. I'm not writing in my bed, on my couch, on the train.
Nowhere.
I'm
No.
between books. But when I start again, it will happen wherever I am and
Mhm.
wherever my laptop is.
Okay,
And
that's great. So of
yeah.
course, Anna's got some things she's hidden and some things she's buried, literally, about her own life. Actually, many
Mhm.
things. So she's on book tour and she starts getting these creepy anonymous messages implying that someone knows her real story. Did you parse them out to build up the tension? Like, okay, this is a thriller. Like going and doing this. Do you plot it out at the beginning, or did it start organically and then go, wait, I've got to move this here. This will bake better here. This will do this. When she's in
Yeah.
this city, this should happen. When this happens here.
Oh, there's a constant moving around of pieces, and it's never plotted out beforehand. I mean, you understand the big things that are going to happen. You understand that she's uh because if you read the plot, you remember that our protagonist, Jacob Finch Bonner, is on book tour when somebody accuses him of having plagiarized the subject of his massively successful book. So it stands to reason that Anna herself is going to be on book tour when she gets that first shot across the bow. Um, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. But an intricate plot doesn't come all at
Two
once. It
seconds.
comes in
Yeah.
pieces, and you often realize I gave something away back on page 100 that she really can't know yet. And there was a photograph I took at this very table I'm sitting at, my dining room table. It must have been the final draft of the novel, and I had realized that I had slipped little piece of information that was not supposed to be in the possession of a character. And I went, oh no. And I ended up taking a picture of all of these pages laid out. Thankfully, it's a long table. Really just trying to figure out the right place for it to go. And, I ended up having to go deep into the novel, back to the earliest parts of the novel. But eventually I made it work. But it's too fiendishly complex to
Hmm.
have it all worked out. I mean, maybe another person's brain can do that. My brain doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's like, how am I going to just move this? And I've seen people do it with different colors and things like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
there's not the way my head would work either. It would be, we're just going to, it's interesting because the other day there is something about parsing the clues and getting you to guess. And I was watching The Perfect Couple on Netflix. And I'm not going to give anything away about the ending, but it was preposterous to me. Like the way the thing ended was just like, are you like kidding me? Like that was, and people, like I sat there and I said this, and somebody said, her parents were watching and they said the exact same thing. She said this made like no, like there were no clues. And it was sort of like, and what's not the way Ellen Hildebrand's book ended. And you know that story because your book was adapted for HBO. And I remember you telling me the
Same
night before.
director.
I remember you telling me for night before. It was so funny. You said, I'm looking forward to seeing how it ends tonight
I
too.
didn't know. My husband and I, before the last episode of The Undoing aired, I said, okay, who do you think did it? Who do you think? We were both wrong. My book, we were both wrong. So there you go.
Yeah, you
There you
just
go.
don't know. But it's like you really want those clues to be dropped so that people can along the way feel like they weren't bamboozled completely. They want to feel like, oh, I might have missed that, but oh yeah, that was there. I forgot about it, you know?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking I did watch The Perfect Couple. I'm attempting to write a script for
Uh-huh.
an 8 episode suspense story now. So you can bet I'm paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. And you sit there and you're really watching. And everybody was talking about the dance scene at the beginning. And I said, well, wait a second. Go watch Mother of the Bride. And there's a scene under the credits that's exactly the same kind of thing where everybody's dancing. So I said, like, that's not novel. That's happening over there. You just had to watch the credits to see it on the other one. I don't know. Like I sit and watch television like I read books. And I'm like, what's going on here? What's happening?
How did you feel about the new ending of Presumed Innocent?
Um, didn't love because I didn't think it was set up right. Once again, I didn't think the person, because in case anybody hasn't watched it, that did it was not set up right. There were three other people that were set up that it could have been, but that
Mhm.
one was not set up right to me. It just didn't work. It didn't make sense. And that was just, that, and then they said they're doing a second season with a new crime. There's going to be a new season of the show with a
Are
new
they
crime.
really?
Yeah, they're doing a new season.
Well,
So,
I think Scott Turow was okay about it. I did write to him afterwards because Presumed Innocent is one of the most
yes,
uh, brilliantly
yes,
plotted, suspenseful novels I personally have ever read. So
yeah,
I was expecting the TV show to mirror the plot
yes,
and the guilty person. I was watching it that way. I was watching the
me too,
character that I thought
me
had
too.
done the crime, and I was pretty shocked when that didn't happen. But he seems to feel that it was fine and he liked it, and so great.
Well,
Doesn't bother him, doesn't bother me.
David Baldacci had this great line about books to screen. I think I heard it like 20 years ago from him. He goes, this is what you do when you get a deal. You take the check and you blow it up on the wall. And you got to have the number on the check be a number you can live with. And so when they call and they say, we want to make the protagonist a woman instead of a man, you look at the check and you go, okay. And he goes, and if you hit something where you look at the check and you don't think it's good enough, that's when you say something. But if not, you've got that check and you go from there. And it was I heard it like 20 years ago, him say it. And I thought very interesting because it's not your work at that point. It's an adaptation. That's exactly what
Absolutely.
it is.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the book goes on, the body count goes up. We learn about her last crimes. And I just love the way it's all like woven in. It's like, oh, and this happened. Oh, and she did this and she did that. But I also love that Anna feels that New York is not where she really wants to live. She's in this fabulous apartment and she reels off a number, and I really love this, of Midwestern cities that she thinks she'd be happy with. She's not going back to Rutland, Vermont. She's not going down south. And she comes up with these places. Are you the most comfortable? Because I remember you were living in Princeton for years and you couldn't wait to get back to New York. Are you still the most comfortable? I remember
Yeah, no,
this.
I'm a New Yorker. This is where they'll carry me out. My husband and I do have a house in upstate New York, which is where the plot and the latecomer and a lot of the sequel were written.
Yeah.
So we love our community up there, but I am a New Yorker,
Yep.
tried and true. Those cities, it was fun. I mean, I think like Red Wing, Minnesota, I had just visited there with some friends. I thought, what a cool place.
Is that the home of Bob Dylan? Was that the home of Bob Dylan?
I
Red
believe
Wings?
it is. Yeah. There's it's where they make Red Wing shoes.
Well, you know,
Or
it's
they,
really funny. Years ago, during the air traffic controller strike, when I was working at the magazine, we were doing a group of fashion shows in the Midwest. And I said, do we really want to be going up on these little airplanes, like flying from city to city? Let's drive. So we had this van, and I said, oh, I had the mobile travel guide at the time. And I said, we could go through Red Wing and we could go to, like, where Bob Dylan. And so I get back and I'm working at Condé Nast, and I walk in and I've got all these receipts from like food stores, like where bought lunch and we ate in the car, like we made sandwiches and stuff. And it was so alien to them of what we had done. And they go, what did you do with the plane tickets? I said, well, they're all here. Like, you can just take these back. I said, but we got this rental car. In every city we stopped, the woman kept saying to us, you can't like go like far with this car. So we get to Minneapolis, we're leaving. And I said to her, I just have a question. Every morning I call her and she'd scream at me. I said, what's the drop off rate in New York? And she starts screaming. And I said, oh, I just want to know, the car was just returned to Minneapolis. And it was just like one of these moments that I feel like it could be like a little television show of us going with a makeup artist, a photographer, and a hairdresser from city to city in the Midwest, and just sitting there and figuring. So when I was reading that part, I was just thinking of that trip of just stopping all these cities along the way, you know? Anna.
well, we New Yorkers are infamous for ignoring the rest of the country. So, but she, of course, Anna, of course, is not a New Yorker. She
Oh,
grew up out of New York, and she doesn't, just as she doesn't get the pretension of writers and like, what are you all such snobs about? Because you do this weird thing. She doesn't feel that New York is all that either.
no.
The thing about Anna is she really just wants to be left alone. She
Hmm.
just wants people to leave her alone. That's all she wanted. Does it get expressed in a certain degree of psychopathology? Maybe, but it's not like she wants riches or fame. She doesn't like killing people necessarily. It doesn't make her happy. She just wants to be left alone. And
Yes.
really, don't we all?
We all do, but by the same token, she gets herself into so many different tough places. There's a thing called a rope bed, which figures into the story. Can you describe this bed to us? And is there a reason that you use this, like that you came to know about this bed?
Sure, I actually sleep on a rope bed,
That's
and
what I
have
thought.
since 1992. I mean, it's not technically a rope bed anymore, but it started its life as one. So, we all know the expression sleep tight, and that derives from this kind of bed that was popular in America and in Europe in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. And it's basically, a bed, the bottom of which is ropes kind of drawn back and forth and then tightened, and then the mattress went on that, and that was a rope bed, and the ropes were attached to these pegs that stick up out of the bed frame. So most of us who have former rope beds at some point have just put down a platform of wood. We don't tighten the ropes on our beds anymore, but those pegs are still there, or holes where the pegs were. And when you write a sequel, you realize that you have to work within the parameters that you left behind in the previous book.
Mhm.
And one thing that I noticed, and I believe me, when I wrote this into the first book, I had no idea that it was going to be important. But there was a piece of furniture that was left in a certain house after the house was sold. And this piece of furniture was a rope bed. Ergo, this bed becomes very, very important because it connects the present of the sequel to the past of the plot.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I had to think, well, what am I going to do with this piece of furniture? How can I get it to serve me? And I did come up with a way to do
Yeah,
that.
it
You
really, really
can't
works.
just make I mean, as Misery so famously said in the novel Misery by Stephen King, you can't, show the train coming down the tracks and almost run over the maiden tied to the train tracks, and then after the commercial break, set the train back a mile and
Right.
have it not be there. And that is cheating. Misery was absolutely right. Stephen
Mm.
King was absolutely right. The reader knows that they're being cheated. You must work with what you have. And that was something that I had.
Yeah, there you have that piece. Yeah, that piece. I really love the chapter titles too. And I saw in the afterword what the chapter titles came from. And I loved it because as I was
Good.
reading them, I'm one of these people that looks at those besides the part one, two, three of the book. So what made you decide? Did you do those as you went, or did you go back and go, okay, I got an idea here?
Well, I was on a plane, and I was in the middle of writing the sequel, and I thought, I should make the chapter titles the titles of sequels. It was just a little meta moment that I thought would be fun. And it was also a way to sort of pay my respects to other writers who have trod this path before of writing a sequel to a previous book. It's definitely easier in some ways. You don't have to remake the world. But as we were just talking about the rope bed, it's harder in other ways because you can't start over. You can't back that train up the tracks. And so I decided that all of the chapter titles, and I can show this because I have the book right here, the chapter titles that are hide the last page here. We don't want anything. The chapter titles are all the titles of sequels. It starts with us. Ready Player 2, More Tales of the City, The Promise, Dance for the Dead. I mean, on and on. These are all the titles of sequels. I hasten to say that they are not all sequels that I have read, but they were great titles. And, there were plenty of great sequels that couldn't be used because they just didn't really work for the story. I mean, you couldn't put Harry Potter in the Chamber of Secrets, a chapter title in this book about a writer who is not a wizard. So
No, I just thought that was completely fun when I sat there and looked at that at the end. So when do your editor and agent see what you've written? Do they see a loose chapter, like a loose frame of this is where I'm going in your first draft, or they see it much later on?
yeah, I'll generally show Suzanne, my agent, a first draft or maybe a second draft. She always has great ideas. When Deb sees it, the editing really begins. And Deb typically will say, let's, look at this area, more general things.
Right.
Or this isn't working, or I wondered what you were doing with this, or this wasn't clear. More of maximalist rather than a minimalist approach. And I will do another draft, and then she'll kind of roll up her sleeves, and we'll get down to the nitty gritty. This paragraph, this sentence, this reference, more specific stuff. And, a few more drafts will follow. And then the happiest day of this writer's life is when she says, you're done. We're putting it into production.
Yeah, it's accepted. We're going in production.
Of course, I end up doing, 3 more panicky, I need to fix something. Don't print it yet.
Yeah.
So that goes on a little longer. But when Deb says you are finished, it is a great, great day.
Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, good. Now I can go do something else. I
That's
feel like
right.
this was always the title. Am I right? Always the title?
You are so right. It was the title before a word was written. I said to Suzanne, my agent, I'm thinking of writing about, I'm writing a sequel to the plot. And she grinned and she said, and we're going to call it The Sequel, which I just thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I started to laugh, and there you go. It's always been The Sequel.
But I love the way they did this on the cover as well, because it's that you definitely know that the other book was the plot. It's like so if you haven't read the plot, you do want to read it before. You can read the sequel by itself, but you're really gonna have a lot more fun if you read the plot. You're really gonna have a lot more fun.
Yeah, and this is something that has never come up with any book that I've ever written. This question of, does it stand alone? This question's never been asked of a book that I've written. And it makes me curious, because why would you want it? I mean, why would you read it without? I think we've been pretty clear. When you call something the sequel, we are saying it is a sequel. And the cover, as you know, has it resting on top of the plot.
Yes.
So, you will be pretty confused if you read the sequel without reading the plot. I wouldn't do it, but you do you, whatever. I don't know, maybe you're the kind of reader who wants that challenge of like, what is going on here? But
Yeah, read books out of order. It's, it's perfectly fine. Go to three and then do two. It's okay. It's fine. Julia Whalen narrates the audio. Julia Whalen, who is like, a goddess
The
of audio,
golden voice of Julia Whalen, I
golden
believe she's
voice.
called.
Have you heard the final version yet? Have you heard
I
it?
have. I've been
Yes.
through it twice. I can't get enough of it. I
Oh.
listened to it with my husband as we were driving up and down to our place upstate. She is the greatest. She also narrated The Latecomer.
Mhm.
Um, I admire her. I like her. She's just a great person. Years ago, I watched her on television. She was on a TV show called Once and Again. She played a teenager. So I knew who she was.
Ah,
But I had probably listened to a lot of her audiobooks, but I hadn't really clocked the name of the narrator. And I just think she's the best. I'm thrilled that she wanted to do this book. She hadn't read the plot. I encouraged her to read the plot before she read the sequel. And I said, you're going to have a lot of fun with this. And she
yeah.
really,
I'm sure she does because it's such a good book. And it's just, I could feel her voice just embodying, this is what's going on. Oh, Anna, you evil little one. Let her voice be evil. Okay. In 2022 it was announced that I'm going to probably do this pronunciation one, Mahershala
Mahershala Ali.
Ali was going
Yeah.
to star in the adaptation of the plot for Hulu and Onyx. And then the strike happened, and then a lot of things happened. Any updated information on the plot where we're
Yeah, it's
actually?
still moving forward. Hollywood being like publishing, a lot of the people who were in place at the time of that announcement are no longer where
Yeah,
they were.
yeah,
So it may end up being with a different streamer, but he's still committed to it. And the script is being written. And I just had a meeting last week with the producer who's also producing the adaptation of The Latecomer, along with another producer. So, yeah, the strikes plural were
yes,
very disruptive.
yes.
But and it's taken some time, I think, for the people to get back in the groove of producing television. But I'm lucky I have a great producer and I have a star who's still very committed to
Committed.
doing it.
Yeah, and it's difficult because a lot of the stars went on to other things. The last thing you told me was not supposed to be the star who it was, and everything's changed. Jennifer Garner was not it, and she did a terrific job, but it was supposed to be, and I'm going to space who it was supposed to be, Julie Roberts. I think it was supposed to be
Oh,
Julie
wow.
Roberts. And then the commitments changed. And I've heard this so much. We've got
Yeah.
somebody to start, but this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
really interesting. The actor whose name I'm spacing right now, who was my gosh, he was in the Showtime show that I loved. It'll come to me. Anyways, he did three things at the same time. He was shooting three things. And he was shooting Wicked and also doing what was it, the big show that's on HBO, the Bridgerton. He was doing three things at the same time. And I was just there. That's amazing to be able to move from, but it's because everything had been backed up. Everything wasn't, he did Fellow Travelers, which was one of the best things I thought I saw on HBO. It was just Showtime rather. It was fantastic. And it was about someone a couple that were gay in the 50s going all the way up to the 80s. And it is brilliantly done.
Oh, see, I
And
never even heard of that.
yeah, it's really, really, really good. I am so bad on names that I can't remember either actor. Matt Bomer's in it, and I can't remember who the other actor is that I'm talking about who did the three things. But they're terrific. I mean, it's absolutely probably one of the best things I've seen of emotional of what happens during this time when it was the lavender years, and it was a lot of things I didn't know about. There were a lot of things
Mhm,
I didn't know that were going on during the McCarthy years that I just
mhm,
hadn't
mhm.
registered with, and going right up to the time of AIDS. And I just so well done. It was one of the shows I highly recommend the most. And but it was to be doing three things at once is hard, and it was also because all the timing just moved. I mean, everything just moved around. So let's go to something else you do because I absolutely stand in awe that you do this, the book, The Writer, where you
Mhm.
run pop-up book groups, small gatherings of authors to discuss great books. So I want our readers and listeners to know because I know some people can log on via
Mhm.
Zoom besides
Mhm.
having the author be there live. So tell us what you're doing. You've got a fabulous lineup this fall.
We have a great lineup this fall. I made the schedule a little smaller than usual. Usually I do 14, 15, 16 events in the fall, but because I have my own book coming out, I made it a little smaller. We have 10. We started a few nights ago with Michael Cunningham. We did his novel Day. We have Joyce Carol Oates, Griffin Dunn, Anna Quinlan, Taffy Brodesser-Akner. It's a really good list. But basically, this is something I've been doing for years. The company is called Book the Writer. And you were the person who taught me, actually, everything that, well, not everything that you know about book groups, but I think you're the only person in America who knows what a book group is. And I remember, I'll never forget, you told me that the average life of a book group is 2.5 years. And that was fascinating. And when we started, that was an important piece of information because we were trying to send authors to book groups.
Right.
That turned out not to be the most effective way to do this. So I ended up basically setting the events and having people come to me. And that was because I kept hearing from people in book groups, I love this idea, but I can't persuade the rest of my book group to do it.
Yeah.
You know, they don't necessarily want the author there. They want to talk about the book for 20 minutes and then talk about other stuff. What if we don't like the book? What if we can't think of what to say to the author? I mean, there were, a lot of reasons that I hadn't thought about. So I thought, well, if I turn the whole thing around, I can bring that one person in every book group who thinks this is a good idea. So now we sell the tickets through Eventbrite, and a week beforehand, I send out the information. This is where it's going to be. It's usually in somebody's fabulous apartment, giving rise to our unofficial slogan, which is come for the literature, stay for the real estate. As New Yorkers, we're all obsessed with other people's apartments. And then during the pandemic, I added online. And of course, I didn't want to lose that after the pandemic was over, if it's over. So we now have a concurrent Zoom, and people can ask the author a question through the Zoom. They can speak to the author. And so we have unlimited people joining us over Zoom, but we are limited to 20 people in the room because it's not Barnes and Noble. It's a living room with 20 people in it and the author. And the other thing that we ask is that you read the book before the book, because we want to have a conversation that goes beyond what's your book about. So that's what we do. And it's a lot of fun. And it's been very good for me because, my secret hidden agenda was, if I do this, if I get up in front of people and talk to all these different authors and make myself prepare for these events, I will overcome my fear of doing all those things. So it's made me much more relaxed in doing things like what we're doing right now. I just force myself again and again and again to sit in front of a room of really smart people and talk to really smart people. And it's been really good for me.
Yeah, you did what you were on with our book group. I remember we're sitting in my dining room. I remember I had you log on. I can't remember which book we were talking about, but I remember we had you join, and the group loved it. I mean, absolutely loved it. And we had Marjan Kamali the other night, and I said, look, you prepare some questions in advance. Somebody couldn't come, so I had her on Zoom so she could still participate. I mean, my book club is made of women who all have young kids, and we always have it at my house, so they get a night out because I don't have kids, little kids. Not little ones. And it just really becomes an interesting evening because we do talk about the book, we talk about other books, and then we talk about life. And for me, it's great because I'm not in touch with what's going on with people who have younger children, and it's a great way for me to hear it. And besides, they're a group of big readers, huge readers, and everybody's bringing something to the table of what they've read. They'll talk to you about the prior book that the author's done. Somebody has read it, and it's, very good from that point of view. So I think that I know that they're a couple that I'm going to probably want to zoom into. I know Griffin, Taffy. I mean, there were some people. You're going to be joining us for the Morristown Festival of the Book in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be interviewing you, and there were some people we try to get, and it's a really tough weekend. People had college visits for their kids, like it's parents' weekend. I think we had 4 people with parents' weekends and things like that, and it's like, I love the lineup we ended up with, but when you sit there and go, well, we did this and then we did that. And I'm like, wait a second, did we have so-and-so or not? And like, did we ask them or not? It's really funny. So, but I really love the idea of what you're doing and the way that people can connect with the author and also listen. If you're not going to ask a question, you're at least able to listen and hear other people. There are times, so many times an author has said, I never saw that in my book until they told me. I never knew I did that. And I
Right.
find it really
You know,
interesting.
this happened the other night with Michael Cunningham, who wrote a book about the that takes place during the pandemic, and one of the characters has a kind of fictional self who he posts about on Instagram, and the name of that character is Wolf. Now, we all know that Michael Cunningham wrote The Hours, which is based on Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway.
Right.
There we go back to that whole in conversation with other books.
Yeah.
Um, I think I said, you could have named this fictional character, this Instagram character, anything, and you named him Wolf. Was that because of your feelings about Virginia Woolf? And he said, it never occurred to me until a few months after the book was out, and somebody pointed it out to me, and I was just gobsmacked. Just it's great to have these moments with an author where the full mystery of the process is on display. We
Hmm.
know that we don't know what we're doing,
Right.
but by the time a book gets to a reader, those are words in black and white on the
Hmm.
page, and they look as if they could never have been any other way.
Hmm.
So it's it's a little window into the mystery of that process.
Right. 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 So do you know what's next? Are you thinking about what's next? Are you working on it?
Right now, I'm trying to write a screenplay, which
Mm.
is a great challenge. Um, it's an original screenplay. It has to do with an old crime and a new crime. And I right now I'm still working on the outline. Maybe one day they'll let me progress to the actual script. No, I think we're almost there. But I also produce a play, which
Mhm.
literally today went on sale. The
Right.
tickets went on sale today. So that's the fall right
Right.
there. It's an adaptation of James Joyce's The Dead,
Hmm.
which I adapted with my husband, and we put it on 3 times before the pandemic over the holidays because it's a holiday story, and then obviously we couldn't do it for 5 years. And but we're back this
Right.
fall, and we just announced our first 2 cast members today. We have Estelle Parsons,
Ooh,
Mary Beth Peel, who is so amazing. She was obviously the mother on the Good Wife. So great. And the rest of the cast will be announcing soon.
fantastic. Fantastic. So it's something different. It takes you away from the book and
Yes.
then you'll move back at some point and
Yeah.
learning the screenplay, learning last year at Morristown Festival, we had Megan Abbott was on the panel with me. And
Mhm.
Megan's the other person didn't come. They became ill. And I said, do you want her to talk about being a showrunner or you want to do a Q&A? And let her talk about how you put a show together. It was
Mm,
fascinating because she talked about
yeah.
Dare Me and she was talking about how they only had the football field. This is a movie about cheerleaders for 2 days. So you've got to shoot everything in those 2 days. And you look at it completely differently after you hear that and what you need to say and what you can show. You can show, not tell. Like
Mhm.
it's just a completely different thing. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
I admire her so much. I mean, I'd love to be able to do what she does.
Yeah,
And she's
it's
a
really
really good
interesting
writer.
because she said it's also exhausting because you're on constantly and it was, she said, if you're writing, let's say 8 episodes, you've only written 1 and 2, 4 is coming, and they ask you to reshoot 2, and you're up to 6, and you're constantly juggling what's going on and then
I'm
begging
getting
for an extra
stressed out
day.
just listening to this, Karen.
I know, and stressing out, you need the football field for another day, and is there budget for it? Because
Yeah.
it's just a logistics kind of thing that's completely different. I'm fascinated by things like that because I find myself watching shows differently now because there may be you could only get those actors for that day, or you're going to maximize your time so things are not done sequentially. And
Mhm.
also, when you think about with books, it's kind of sometimes the same thing. You're going to come up with something, and as you said, you're going to have to go back and make changes along the way. Same deal.
Mhm.
Same deal. Lots to learn. Jean, as always, it's been fabulous. It's been fabulous. I wish you so much luck with the sequel. I love
Thank
it.
you.
Looking forward to seeing you soon and to what you're doing next. Thank you so much for
See
joining us.
you at the book fair.
See you at the book fair. Thanks so much.
Okay.
To everybody else, we'll see you next time on Book Reporter Talks To.